Hello and welcome to IP Study video lectures. Today we will discuss chapter 5 of grade 7. The chapter name is The Rise of Empires. In this chapter we will discuss these topics. First, what is an empire? Then, trade routes and guilds. Next, the rise of Magad. Next we have the rise of Nandas. After that we will discuss Alexander's conquest. Then the mighty Mauryas. After that, life in the Mauryan period, and last, why great empires rise and fall. Now come to the chapter. Now come to the introduction. During the second urbanization, small villages developed into towns and cities. Trade and agriculture flourished, due to which the strong administration and the need for protection also take place. Powerful local leaders emerged and began ruling larger areas and forming early kingdoms. First, we will discuss what is an empire. Empire, the word empire comes from the Latin word imperium, which means command and power to rule. Empire is different from kingdom. To understand the empire, we will also discuss what is kingdom and what is the difference between these two. Kingdom means when king or queen rules small village or region, that is kingdom. But at the other hand, empire is something in which so many kingdoms or so many villages comes under the empire. For example, an empire is vast area comprising numerous territories, cultures and population, all governed by the single powerful leader, often referred to as an emperor. While kingdom usually has people of the same background and language, an empire rules over mix of different communities across a much larger territories. That means in kingdom, the king or queen rules small region, but in empire, the emperor or empress rule over a vast area or a vast kingdom, you can say. For example, here in kingdom also, there is only one kind of people, or we can say from one community, but in empire there are different communities of people, so they speak diverse languages. Now come to who is an emperor. An emperor is the most powerful ruler who controls the entire empire comprising many different regions and kingdoms. An emperor is the supreme ruler of large empire. He has more power than king because he rules over multiple kingdoms and region. Sometimes instead of directly ruling every small kingdom, the emperor allows smaller kings to continue ruling their land, and these referred to as tributary kingdoms. What is tributary kingdoms? A tributary kingdom is a smaller kingdom that accepts the emperor's power and control. Next is to show their greatness. Emperors in ancient India used big titles or notable titles. For example, Maharaja Dhiraja, that means the great king of kings. Then Chakravartin, which means universal ruler. Then titles like Samrat and Raja Dhiraja also reflect high status. Why they use these status or title? Because they want to show their power and how big they are. Next, the key features of the empire. First, we have the vast territory and forts. Empire covered large area with mountains, rivers, plains, forest. Fort were built on the borders to protect these lands. Next, diverse population. As an empire, number of community live in single empire because different villages have different custom, different language, different things. So in empire, they all connected with each other, or you can say belong to different communities and spoke different languages. Next, stronger ruler and officials. The emperor ruled from the capital with the help of trusted officials and ministers. Next, we have powerful armies and expansion. The emperor maintains strong army to protect the empire, control smaller kingdoms and expand new territories. Next, well-organized administration. Empire appoints officials who help collect taxes, maintain law and order. Next, control over natural resources. Important resources such as mines, forest, farmland and skilled workers were managed by the administration to support the economy as well as the military. Next, good transportation and communications system. Empires constructed roads, riverside ports, sea routes to facilitate trade. Then trade and economy. A standard system of coins, weights and trade laws boosted trade and growth. Next, art, religion and education. Emperor supports temples, schools, libraries and encourage learning, culture and religious activities. Now come to the important topic, that trade routes and guilds. Have you ever wondered how ancient rulers managed to maintain huge armies and build magnificent mountains? The answer lies in the strong army that support these achievements. Fighting wars, especially in distant regions, were very costly. Soldiers needed food, clothes, weapons and regular payments. War elephant and horses needed daily care and feeding. Roads has to be built for army to travel and ships were needed for the sea battle. All of these required a lot of money, workers and raw material. This is why economic activities, especially production and trade, become the backbone of the empire. Now come to the trade routes, lifelines of the empire. We have already learned in the previous chapter that controlling major trade route was very important for ancient rulers. This was well understood by the early empires like Mauryans and later by others such Kushans, who control key section of the Silk Route. The logic was straightforward. More trade route meant greater variety and quantity of goods being exchanged. Why did ancient India need trade? Ancient India was rich in goods and vibrant trade, as evident in ancient texts and archaeological finds. Indian goods traveled by land, by sea, to distant places like Vietnam, Egypt and even Britain. Roman writers claim that sustainable amount of Roman gold was sent to India in exchange for luxury goods. And established trade center along its coast. The main trade items included agricultural products, textiles, spices, luxury items and animals. Now come to the next topic, the rise of guilds. First we will understand what are guilds. Guilds in ancient time, traders did not work independently. They formed groups. That groups is called guilds or shrenis. To support each other and grow their business, a guild was association of people doing the same kind of work. For example, traders guild, moneylenders guild, craftsmen's guild, goldsmith, agricultural guild. They are doing the same kind of work. Each guild had a head and other officers, usually elected by the members. These leaders were expected to be honest and work for the benefit of everyone. Decisions were made together, making guilds democratic in nature. Guilds became very successful for the two main reasons. First reason is the members worked together rather than competing with each other, and guilds were self-governing bodies with the freedom to make their own rules and solve disputes. Next is guilds existed across India for centuries, with branches in many cities to support trade. Some guilds even provided services like loans, currency exchange and insurance for traders. They kept record of their members' finances and trade deals. Over time, guild evolved with new rulers, trade route, technologies. Even after guilds ceased to exist formally, their ideas and system continued to influence Indian trade and business to this day also. Now come to the rise of Magads. Around 6th century BCE, Indian subcontinent was divided into 16 Mahajanpads. Magad, located in present-day Bihar, emerged as the most powerful one of Janpad during the time period of 6th century. It eventually united much of the northern India and became the base of the India's first great empire. So the Haryanka or Shishunaga dynasty laid a strong foundation for the expansion through military conquest and good administration. Under Bimbisar of the Haryanka dynasty, Magad expanded by conquering Anga. His son Ajatasattu further strengthened the kingdom by gaining control of Koshala region, and let us now examine the key reasons that contribute the rise of Magad. So here is the region Magad. First, geographical advantage. Magad was situated in eastern part of the Indo-Gangetic plain, which provided with numerous natural advantages. First, it had several important rivers like Ganga, Son, Gandak and Kosi. Next, second, rivers and hills surrounded Magad, making it hard for enemies to attack. Then third, it was situated in the central location where trade route connected. This meant that traders going between eastern, western, northern India often passed through Magad only. Next, natural resources. Magad's rise can be attributed to the natural resources found in and around it. The most magnificent one was iron. While many other kingdoms still used bronze and copper, Magad used iron during that period of time. Good quality of iron ore from nearby regions, Magad blacksmiths learned to make strong iron weapons and tools, which gave them a decisive advantage. Iron plows helped farmers to grow more food by cultivating hard soil effectively. So iron helped in agriculture sector also. Other valuable resources included copper for coins and decoration, stones for building, and wood from forest fuels, boats and houses. Now come to the agricultural prosperity. Magad's wealth was primarily based on the strong agricultural sector. As you already know, they used iron during that period of time, so agriculture also flourished. The land had fertile alluvial soil, making it ideal for growing crops. Next, military supremacy. Magad had one of the most powerful armies in the ancient times. It had a professional army that trained full-time and consisted of 4 parts: foot soldiers, horse riders, chariots pulled by horses, and mighty war elephants. Now come to the next topic, the rise of Nandas. The Nanda dynasty ruled Magadha from around 345 to 321 BCE, just before the rise of Mauryan Empire. This dynasty changed the traditional idea that only people from royal or noble families could become the ruler in ancient India. Most historians believe that Mahapadmananda, the first Nanda king, came from a humble Shudra background. This was unusual because most kings at that time came from the Kshatriya or warrior caste. Using his intelligence and ambition, he overthrew the old rulers and built his own empire. Mahapadmananda took the title Ekarath, which means sole ruler. Now come to the Nanda dynasty at its peak. Under Nanda dynasty, Magad became the largest and most powerful kingdom in northern India during that time. The Nanda dynasty was much bigger than any earlier kingdom, stretches east to the Bay of Bengal, west into Uttar Pradesh and parts of Rajasthan, north to foothills of the Himalayas, and south into central part of India. The Nanda collected taxes efficiently, controlled important trade routes, which made effective use of natural resources. Now come to the decline of Nanda power. Even though Nanda dynasty was rich, large and had a strong army, it started to weaken during the rule of its last king, Dhanananda. Dhanananda was the last ruler of the Nanda dynasty. He is remembered for being very harsh and greedy. People disliked him because he taxed them heavily and seemed more concerned with collecting money than ruling fairly. During Dhanananda's rule, Alexander's invasion from northwestern India created tension, forcing the Nandas to keep troops on the western border. Thus, Dhanananda's unfair rule, heavy taxation, and lack of public support weakened the empire from within. All these reasons combined together, and these are the reasons for the decline of Nanda dynasty. Now, here is the topic: Alexander's conquest. Alexander was a young and powerful king from Macedonia. He campaigned against the Persian Empire to avenge earlier Persian invasions of Greece. After conquering the huge Persian Empire, which covered vast area of Asia, Europe, Africa, Alexander wanted to continue his journey east to reach what he called the end of the world. In 327 BCE, Alexander and his army crossed the Hindu Kush mountains through Khyber Pass to enter India and reached Punjab region in northwestern India. Near the Hydaspes River, modern-day Jhelum River, Alexander fought a fierce battle against King Porus, a brave ruler of Punjab. Alexander's army defeated Porus, but still he allowed him to continue his ruling his kingdom as satraps, that means a local governor appointed to manage parts of empire. That is because Alexander impressed by the tactics of Porus and his courage. Next is Greek records state that Alexander's campaigns after Porus faced strong resistance and local tribes and rulers. In some battles, women fought alongside men. Alexander himself was seriously wounded in one fight. Now the army refuses to go further. When Alexander reaches to the Beas River, his soldiers refuse to advance further toward the Ganga River. They were exhausted after many years of fighting and traveling far from home. The land ahead was unfamiliar and believed to be inhabited by strong and dangerous enemies. For this reason, Alexander's soldiers decided they would not continue east and instead wanted to return home to their families. On the way back, Alexander divided his army. Some soldiers traveled by sea along the coast of the Arabian Sea. Others took a land route through harsh Zagrosian desert in modern-day Iran and Pakistan, where many died from thirst, hunger, and disease. Now last, political problems and Alexander's death. After years of successful conquest, Alexander the Great faced serious political challenges, especially in the vast territories he had conquered. In Persia, there were frequent rebellions by local groups unwilling to rule by the foreign king. These uprisings made it difficult for Alexander to maintain control over the vast empire. In 323 BCE, while in the city of Babylon, Alexander suddenly fell ill and died at the age of 32 only. His unexpected death caused so much tension because he had not mentioned successor to inherit his empire. After his death, his general and satraps fought among themselves for power. This struggle led to the division of Alexander's vast empire into smaller kingdoms. These included the Seleucid Empire in Persia, Ptolemaic Kingdom in Egypt, and Antigonid Dynasty in Macedonia. The division of Alexander's empire marked the end of his dream to create a vast single empire. Still, his conquest spread Greek culture across Asia, influencing the regions for centuries to come. His Greek culture that becomes Indo-Greek that influenced India. Greeks influenced our culture, our art and architecture also. Next is The mighty Mauryans. The powerful alliance between the young warrior Chandragupta Maurya and the brilliant political thinker Chanakya, also known as Kautilya, led to defeat of Nanda dynasty. This marked the beginning of Mauryan Empire, one of the most remarkable empires in the Indian history. It was founded around 321 BCE. The Mauryan Empire became the largest and most powerful empire in ancient India. It stretched from Afghanistan to Bengal to Himalayas in the north to Deccan Plateau in the south. Its capital was at Patliputra, modern-day Patna. Here is the Mauryan Empire you can see in the map in the Indian subcontinent. Now come to the Kautilya, the mastermind behind the empire. Kautilya, also known as Chanakya, was wise and skilled teacher at famous Takshashila University. One of the oldest center of learning in ancient India, he was an expert in subjects like politics, economics, diplomacy and warfare. His story began in royal court of Dhanananda, the last ruler of Nanda dynasty, who had become very unpopular due to harsh and greedy rule. Kautilya, deeply concerned about the future of the kingdom, advised Dhanananda to change his unjust ways and become a fair and wise ruler. But instead of listening, Dhanananda grew angry. He insulted Kautilya in front of his entire court and had him thrown out in disgrace. Feeling deeply humiliated, Kautilya took a vow to destroy the unjust rule of the Nanda and free the people from the suffering. Kautilya set out to find capable leader who could help him succeed. Soon, he found a young and courageous warrior named Chandragupta Maurya who would become that leader. Next, the rise of Chandragupta Maurya. There are many stories about Chandragupta Maurya, early life and adventures. But they all agree on one important fact, that they defeated the powerful Nanda dynasty. Magadha was already a highly important kingdom due to strategic location, strong economy, busy trade, and these advantages helped Chandragupta build a strong empire. Chandragupta slowly expanded his empire. He first defeated the Nandas, then moved to conquer the land in the east northwest that had been ruled by the Greek generals left behind after Alexander the Great invasion. He first defeated the Nandas and then moved to conquer the lands of northwest that had been ruled by the Greek generals left behind the Alexander's invasion. Next, one of these generals was Seleucus Nectar, whom Chandragupta defeated in 305 BCE. This victory gave him control over a large area, including parts of Afghanistan, even 500 war elephants that strengthened his army. Next is Chandragupta did not stop there. He created well-organized system of administration, well-organized system of military, and one Greek diplomat and historian, Megasthenes, even visited Chandragupta's court. Under Chandragupta's leadership and with Kautilya's guidance, the Mauryan Empire expanded to become one of the largest and most powerful empire in the ancient India, stretching from the northern plains down to the Deccan Plateau in the south. Now come to the Kautilya's concept of kingdom. Kautilya laid out a clear vision of how a kingdom or Rajya should be organized and ruled. His ideas are primarily found in his famous book Arthashastra. Arthashastra written by Kautilya only, in which we can read about governance, economics, military strategies in India. In this book, he explained what makes kingdoms strong, stable and successful. Triple S. Next is Saptanga and 7 elements of kingdom. First, the king, that is Swami. Next, the ministers. Ministers help the king to make decisions and run the kingdom. Then territory, that means Janapada also. This include the land, people, cities, village and especially the capital city also. Next, fort. The fort or capital city must be well protected with walls, gates and guards. Then we have the treasury. Kosha, the treasury, is where the kingdom's wealth is stored. Army, that means Danda, a disciplined army is vital for protection and peace. And last is allies or mitra. Allies were important for trade, defense and mutual benefits. Kautilya placed a great importance on law and order. He believed that good government must have strong administration and fair laws to maintain peace in society. No matter how powerful a ruler is, he should always put his people first. This made his concept of kingdom not just powerful but also thoughtful and just. Now come to the Ashoka, one of the powerful ruler of Mauryan Empire. Ashoka, the grandson of Chandragupta Maurya, was one of the most famous and powerful emperors of the Indian history. He ruled the Mauryan Empire from around 268 BCE to 232 BC. At the beginning of his reign, Ashoka was a brave and determined ruler who believed in expanding his empire through war and conquest. The Kalinga War, a turning point. After this war, Ashoka left war, or you can say he went towards the dharma and peace. One of the most important events in Ashoka's life was Kalinga War, which took place in 261 BCE. Kalinga was a wealthy and independent kingdom located in what is now the state of Orissa. Ashoka wanted to annex this region into his empire. However, the war was extremely violent and caused the death of over 1 lakh people, with many more injured and left homeless. Kalinga was very important during that period of time because it is very flourishing in terms of economy, in terms of agriculture, in terms of trade. So number of rulers want that place. That's why it is important in history. After the battle, Ashoka went to the battlefield and saw the destruction. And he saw the dead bodies, the grieving families and pain his army had caused. This experience had a deep emotional effect on him. He felt shocked, saddened and ashamed of violence. And after this war, he stopped fighting and moved towards dharma and peace. Ashoka embraces Buddhism and Dhamma. After the war, Ashoka decided to give up violence forever. He turned to Buddhism, a religion that teaches kindness, peace, and compassion, and most importantly, non-violence. He began to follow the teaching of Buddha and promised to rule his empire with love and rather than fear. Ashoka adopted a new policy called Dhamma, that means doing what is right. His idea of Dhamma was not about following one religion, but about moral living, respect for all faiths and caring for others. Ashoka's Dhamma included non-violence, religious tolerance, kindness, helping the poor, fair treatment, encouraging people to avoid anger, greed and cruelty. Ashoka did not confine his beliefs just to his kingdom. He sent Buddhist missionaries to many parts of the world, including Sri Lanka, Central Asia, Egypt, Southeast Asia. His son Mahinda and daughter Sangamita went to Sri Lanka to spread Buddhism. Due to Ashoka's effort, Buddhism spread across Asia and had profound influence on many cultures. Here is the regions where Buddhism spread. Now come to the Ashoka's edicts and pillars. Ashoka wanted his people to understand Dhamma and live by its values. To spread these values, he had his message carved on rocks and tall stone pillars across his empire. He inscribed the messages on the hard surface, or you can say pillars, stones, etc. These writings were known as edicts. The edicts were written in Prakrit. Prakrit is a regional language. The language spoken by most of the people at that time were inscribed using Brahmi script. Some edicts in northwestern part of empire, Shahbazgari and Mansehra used Kharoshti script. Furthermore, there were also few edicts in Greek and Aramaic also. In his edicts, Ashoka himself described Devanam Priya Piyadasi, which means beloved of gods and one who looks at others with kindness. These titles show that Ashoka wanted to be seen as a kind and caring ruler. Ashoka also had rest houses built and wells dug along roads to help travelers. He planted fruits and shed trees to provide comfort to people and animals. Now come to the Ashoka rule with compassion and wisdom, caring not just for power but also for the welfare of his people, animal and the environment. In line with Kautilya's idea that a good king must always put his subjects first or people first. Here are the Ashokan edicts in these places. These are some important major rock edicts regions. Now come to the next topic, the life in the Mauryan period. Cities in the Mauryan Empire were bustling centers of activity and trade. The capital city, Patliputra, was one of the most magnificent cities in the ancient world, with well-planned streets, beautiful palaces, and public buildings. These cities were designed in an orderly manner and wide roads and well-organized markets. The cities were home to various professionals, including royal officials, merchants, craftsmen, traders, skilled workers such as blacksmiths, porters, carpenters, jewelers lived and worked in the urban areas. Here, the Mauryan Panchmark coins were the earliest form of currency in India. Made mainly of silver, they featured symbols like sun, animals, and geometric shapes punched onto the coin surface. These coins were used for trade and reflected the organized economy of the Mauryan Empire. Now, most houses were made of wood and some wealthy people had two-story homes. Water pots were placed on streets to be used in case of fires. People in Mauryan period wore simple cotton clothes that were suitable for the climate. Now, the village life of Mauryan Empire. The majority of people in Mauryan Empire lived in villages and worked as farmers. Village life was peaceful and productive as farmers were protected from the effects of wars and conflicts. The empire ensured that agricultural work continued to uninterrupted even during military campaigns. Next, agriculture was highly successful during this period. Mainly regions, farmers cultivated 2 crops annually. Next is art and culture and their achievements. The Mauryan period is renowned for its exceptional art and architecture. One of the most famous examples is the lion capital at Sarnath, where the 4 lions stand proudly back to back on circular base. Below them are carvings of elephant, bull, horse, lion, along with the Dharma Chakra, wheel of Dharma, which stands for Buddha's teaching. This symbol of royal power and peace has become the national emblem of India. Next, another notable achievement of this period was Sanchi Stupa, a large dome-shaped structure built to house sacred relics of the Buddha. The Sanchi Stupa is beautifully decorated with carvings that depicted scenes from the Buddha's life. Here are the terracotta sculptures. A Mauryan artist also made terracotta figures, which were small clay models of animals, people, and daily life scenes. Another example of Mauryan skills is the rock-cut sculpture of the life-size elephant found in Dholi in Odisha. Next, these artworks shows the Mauryan art was not only grand and royal but also thoughtful, peaceful, and deeply spiritual. Next is why great empires rise and fall. Throughout history, the world has seen many powerful empires that once ruled vast territories and millions of people. Just like Mauryan Empire in ancient India, there have been other mighty empires such as Roman Empire in Europe, Persian Empire in Middle East, Ottoman Empire, and British Empire, which spread across the globe. However, all these great empires eventually came to an end, historians continue to study and debate the reasons for their decline and fall. Here are the common reasons for the decline of empires. First was financial problem, then weak successors, size of the empire, huge empires had hard to manage. Next, natural disaster. Empires offer both benefits as well as problems, which is why they rise quickly but fall also and became unstable over time. Here are the benefits and the problems of empire. Empire like Mauryan Empire brought peace by uniting many regions under one rule. This reduced constant warfare, allowing trade, roads, laws and prosperity. They also encouraged cultural exchange and spread of knowledge. But the problems were most empires were built through war and maintained by force. To control large and diverse population, rulers often used harsh punishments and military power. This led to resentment among the conquered people who sought their independence. The rise and fall of empire show that power brings both achievement and challenges. Even the greatest emperors can't solve all the problem of ruling large diverse land. This reminds us to appreciate their success and understand that no empire lasts forever. That's all for the chapter. In this chapter, we have discussed about the emperor, empire, about Magadha, Nanda dynasty, and last, the Mauryan Empire. In this chapter, we discussed trade, guilds, and many more things about administration as well as art and culture. And last, we discussed the benefit and problems of the empire. That is all for this chapter. Thank you for watching.